our education system.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize. Because it's just cultural. And I think it's just human nature.
They stop paying us salary. I don't like remembering it.
I am angry at Nigeria. I'm angry at this government which seems to be letting us down. I'm angry at us as a people.
In the process of struggling to free myself from his hand, he tore my pants and he raped me.
Yes, I commit offense truly.
Young girl, do you know where you are going? I say, I'm going to America. I say, now so that they talk, you are going to Libya, which America?
As it then do mark our place, some people they die now.
This is Plus TV Africa. Big stories live here.
The Independence Day usually comes with a multiplicity of reactions from Nigerians. And as Nigeria clocks 60 today, Plus TV Africa took to the streets to get reactions on their dream Nigeria.
Then where did that place will be the president? May they help us. Try. May they make things easy for us.
We want the country to be improved, to create jobs, and people that do not have job, let them have jobs so that no stealing, no corruption. All those people who used to beg. So we want to abandon.
Welcome back. It's still our Independence Day special broadcast, and we are moving straight to the judiciary. Earlier on, we played a report done by Ifeoluwa Oshukeye, where he tried to chronicle what we encountered during the military when the decree was in use and the constitution that we have now. So we are going to be doing a whole lot of analysis on these issues. And we have what I describe as competent hands in the studio, live in the studio, so there's not going to be any network problem. Our own Liberos Oshoma, I don't know, I'm tired of calling him a lawyer because sometimes he speaks as an accountant, he speaks as activist, it's all-rounder. Liberos Oshoma, good morning. And happy independence.
Yes,
whether
I'm
it is happy.
I'm happy.
And we
I chose
have,
to be happy.
And we have Dele Farotimi, the man I prefer, or because he prefers to refer to himself as a retired lawyer. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. K. Calling myself a retired lawyer is my way of divorcing myself of complicity in the judicial mess that we have in our country. So yeah, okay. I'm a retired lawyer.
That's a good way to start this discussion, but I won't start with you now. Liberal Sushoma, we might need a bit of education here. Some would say that if not for the decree, the states that some people celebrate today wouldn't have happened, the creation of states. But let's look at the merits, if there are any or at all, about the decree we had and the constitution we're supposed to enjoy. And are we truly enjoying that?
If not that these states were decreed into existence, that probably we won't have states that we have today. Can you, in all honesty, call what we have today as viable, compared to the only one we have ever created through a referendum? That's the Midwestern states. And so for me, when people say, yes, we're celebrating state creation and that they were decreed into existence, we probably would have done it, better, far better. The people would have had a voice in determining whether they want to, whether they wanted that state or they wanted those boundaries the way, it was proposed. It probably would have been better. And so I'm not one to sit down and begin to celebrate, things that were decreed into existence without, consultation with the people. Coupled with the fact that, we say, oh yes, we have a 1999 constitution, but we also forget that it was decreed into existence. It was a schedule to Decree 24 of 1999. Even people that participated in the election, a lot of them did not even see the constitution that they were haggling to rule with, including the president then. So, I'm not one to celebrate decrees, and it is obvious now, very, very, very visible to the blind and audible to the deaf, that these states that you are celebrating today are not viable. Some of them can't pay salaries until they go to, a big brother center. That's why I call it feeding bottle, federal government, federal structure, until they get there to get bailout to pay. And so these same people that decreed these states into existence also decreed what you call a federal structure. Mind you, Aguiyi Ironsi was killed for running this unitary system of government that we run today, that we are running away from discussing. He was killed for having a unitary system of government. But today, we cloak ourselves in a federal structure. But in real sense, what we have is a unitary system. So all of those states creation, that's not the way you create states.
Let's get your thoughts, even though you say you prefer to be called a diverse lawyer. I don't know whether that will apply in the conversation, but let's get your thoughts on this subject matter.
There is a peculiarly Nigerian predilection, and that is the one where we have a tendency to take a word and then infuse it with a uniquely Nigerian meaning, and then even the English wouldn't recognize their word anymore. One of them is the word federalism.
Right.
If Nigeria is a federation, I'm Chinese. Let that sink in. A friend of mine called it a fraudal system. Another called it a feudal, I don't even know. It's a fraud. It is anything but federal. Nigeria is the only place in the whole world, and I stand to be corrected on these, where the federal government creates federating units. It is incongruous. It has never happened. It is not known to law or to the English language. It doesn't make sense. A federation means, and let's be clear about this, none of the regional leaders would have agreed to be part of a unitary Nigerian state. The leaders of the western part of Nigeria, I've read extensively, I've read Chief Obafemi Awolowo's works. They always knew they were contending with a feudal force coming out of northern Nigeria. The only protection they could see, which made them agree to a one Nigeria, was that there would be a federal system with strong regions.
That's true.
That was the agreement. A state was stolen in 1966. And the bandits who stole Nigeria in 1966 have not left Nigeria. We lost our citizenship in 1966. We can go ahead and be bandying words like federalism, unitarism. If you must call Nigeria anything, it's a unitary state. But foundational to the mess and putrefaction you see all around you, and why we are not happy on the occasion of the lie called independence 60 years ago, is the realization that in truth and content, Nigerians have been reduced from citizens to subjects and serfs. And our rulers have become untouchable men who rule and govern with impunity.
Okay. You choose to call them rulers.
Okay. They are not leaders. Don't kid yourself.
Liberals, my confusion with history here is that the military had been there, and the proper thing for them is to leave. And now they had to leave, but they couldn't leave without a constitution. So I think the problem is, my opinion, it's the people that took over. What stops you from giving us a new constitution? Why should we continue to say, oh, the military handed the constitution to us and we refuse to do another draft?
You see, let's position history properly so that in time to come, our names will be written in gold in the sand of time. So when you talk about, oh yes, they handed you a constitution, first and foremost, I take your mind back to all the constitutional debates that predated independence, and how heated those arguments and those meetings were. And so if you also remember, take you back a little bit to the creation of states and the debates on federating unit between Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe and Chief Obafemi Awolowo. I've forgotten the journalist's name now, a British man. He said in his entire life, he had never seen a debate as robust as that, parliamentary debate as robust as that. You know, they took 2 days. The first day for Chief Obafemi Awolowo and the next day for Nnamdi Azikiwe. And Nnamdi Azikiwe made, Chief Obafemi Awolowo made, you know, a very profound statement then that if you start creating states today, until Ikene, his hometown, becomes a state, we will not rest. And so that's the kind of works that goes into making of a constitution. And so, knowing fully well that, look, if you bring a bunch of people together, knowing the kind of, you know, mental capacity and intellectual tendencies that they have, you know, it will be difficult for them to agree. Right from the 60s. Even in that debate, Nnamdi Azikiwe made also another statement that when two incompatible mates, they can coexist if they agree to agree, but unagree to disagree. But the question is, the people that we brought together in 1999, were they the set of persons you truly would believe will sit down and agree to agree or agree to disagree? And that's why, even like I told you, even the constitution that they were to work with, the document, none of them saw it. But there were people who had, you know, a few who had a common enemy in the military, and others who, you know, in their quests for power and leadership, just felt, you know, any which way, anyhow it goes, let us grab it. And so since that time, they have grabbed this power. To debate that document, you call constitution, they also saw the benefit for them. And that's why before the program,
very unitary in nature.
We were talking about somebody, you in the last guest talked about the parliament defeating Obasanjo's third term. And we joined the chorus. It wasn't because of the people, because you had some other persons who were waiting to take over. And so the longer Obasanjo sits there, the shorter their time of taking over. And so that was the fight. It was a class struggle.
I understand.
And so in the same vein, the people that the constitution were handed over to, that why did you think they carefully selected Obasanjo? Why not Olufalaye? Why not Bola Ige? Obasanjo was selected for a reason. Oh, yes, this
selected?
Man. Yes, in 1999.
Wasn't elected?
He was selected by the quote and unquote rulers who were living because they felt comfortable with him. He's the one who won't rock the boat, the one who won't change the status quo.
Okay.
And so over time, after that, that is why every year, every 4 years, it keeps getting worse rather than, you know, seeing improvement. Because you have the worst of us, so sum it up, because you have the worst of us ruling over the best of us. So you can never have a situation where the worst of you will sit down and say, let us agree to agree and agree to disagree.
Okay. You just brought in another aspect to this, and I am asking, what does it take? How do we even achieve this? Because that's the way forward, and I'm sure that you have all the problems right on the palm of your hand. What's the way forward for us to have? No, from what they've said now, they've dissected our issues. But I'm looking at how do we actually evolve this document? Because I've heard from some of your colleagues saying that sometimes the problem is implementation, that we could still make the best out of the document we have.
Let's, the sooner we stopped lying to ourselves, the quicker we are likely to get to a resolution of our issues. If you have constructed a foundation and the design is intended to carry 2 levels, G+2, that's a 2-story building. And then you come round to the architect or the builder and you say, look, you see, I don't particularly like the idea of having a 2-story building. Can we make it a 9-story building? The first thing that the architect or whoever, a responsible builder, will tell you is that you need a different foundation for the structure that you want. Nigerians hate hearing these words, and I've said it ad nauseum, and it is the word, revolution. Revolutions don't necessarily have to be violent. It just means a turnaround. In Nigeria's case, the revolution we require is a change to that fraudulent 1999 constitution. The last, as Liboros has rightly pointed out, prior to the 1960 Independence Constitution, there were several constitutional conferences from Ibadan to Kaduna to Lancaster House to Lagos here to Enugu. People argued back and forth. The minorities spoke their minds. They expressed their fears. The fears of the minority led to the enshrinement of the Bill of Rights in the 1960 Constitution as a recommendation of the Willings Commission. Federalism was the binding glue that made people error, DECO, and the AD. They could have demanded the same restructuring that we are now still begging for. The same thing that was demanded in Eburi is what we were... Every time that the Nigerian people have sought to express their will, they've been smacked down. So when we're talking about perfecting this 1999 Constitution, let me tell you straight up, however much you might pray, however much you might want it, you can will, we pray a lot in Nigeria. We'll be making noise like bearded chicken. No matter how hard we pray, there is no way I can add an inch to my height. And I'm not going to grow as fair as my sister here. I'll remain the brown man that I am. Those are facts. Well, those are facts. The 1999 Constitution is incurably bad, is a fraud, is a document for the enslavement of the Nigerian people, and we need to get rid of it if we must have peace in Nigeria.
You warned me before this conversation, but Liberals, I'll go back to examining the judiciary generally, and you might say, "Oh, I'm thinking like a mediocre now in terms of what used to be under military and what we have now. There seems to be more freedom of press. There seems to be more form of expressions, because I think if you were to do this during the military, they would be waiting for you outside the door. So how do we assess our level of constitutional democracy, so to say? Is it 0%?
I would also want to quickly disagree.
Okay.
That we talk more now than under the military. Under the military, you had restricted, platforms for airing
expression.
Your view. They were restricted. Now a lot of people talk more. If you had WhatsApp at that time, maybe IBB probably wouldn't have ruled for 8 years or 9 years that he ruled. They even listen more. IBB once said something of Chief Gani Fahimi, that if there was any critic he respected, it was Chief Gani Fahimi, because he was consistent. And so, forget the fact that, yes, some of these people, most of them were arrested. But today, you talk about freedom. How many of us are consistent in demanding for that thing that, yes, this is the way to go? How many of us are consistent?
So the thing is,
and
when
you hear us argue PDP and APC as though, the alternative to one another, and yet you say freedom. And so that's why some people will still look at you and say, "Oh, I wish the Gani Fahimi, the Bekor and some Kutis were alive today. I wish we could still have the like of Fela Nicola Kuti." Because under these circumstances, their voice were heard the loudest. But today, that you say, "Oh, yes, you have constitutional democracy, there's freedom to talk," how many of those talks have we been consistent with? That's, for me, should be the question, and not whether we're under the military. For military government in the first place, they knew that it was an aberration. And they also knew that they were in a terrain that they shouldn't be. So at every turn, they were always... We had more protests under military than under democracy. Despite the fact that they will tell you, don't go out there to protest. You had the anti-SAP riots.
And maybe because this one is government of the people, by definition.
That's your, okay, by definition.
We have been
so when you also
look
at the interpretation of the laws by the Supreme Court then, you also look at what we have now in your own analysis clearly. Can you say that when you had the likes of Oputa GSC, when you had the likes of Ogudare GSC, when you had the likes of Otutu Obaseki and the rest. And can you truly compare, in all honesty, this set of, judges with what you have now at the Supreme Court, where even somebody will tell you that this judgment, even a year one lawyer will tell you that this judgment cannot stand the test of time in law. But, so when you put all of this together, you find out that the people we had then, because of the vociferousness of, a lot of us Nigerians, even our leaders, our rulers, then at every turn were consistently looking behind their back because they know that Nigerians were not happy and that we insisted. And why do you think also, like Dele has said, that when in 1999, pre the election in 1999, the military government wanted every part of Nigeria to accept or participate in the election, the proposed election. But today, we conduct election and we don't even care whether you participate or whether you accept. We just say election ahead. If you don't, and then you hear a governor or a president tell you, if you are not happy with the outcome, go to court. So when you juxtapose this, really, and that's why the only answer you get is the good old days.
Yeah, but that's where I'm conflicted, and really frustrated, so to say. Yes, because all the time we make reference to the good old days, and just like you're saying, that we didn't have those voices. Are you in any way implying that even in the system, even where we are, there are no voices, or the voices have been compromised? Otherwise, in another 60 years, if we're still here, this same line of thought will continue, and the conversation will be the same.
The voices are fewer, and that's why you will hear the same set of people that demanded for subsidy removal, the same set of people that demanded for fight against corruption, the same set of people that proposed how Nigeria can be better. Now you have them in leadership, and they do the exact opposite of what they had proposed before. Now the same set of people that told you, TM, or what do you call it, that police commissioner, that said fire at sight anybody that snatched ballot box. Yeah. Those same people that criticize him.
Joseph Mbu.
Joseph Mbu. They are the same people that will endorse Buhari's statement when he says fire at sight anybody that snatched ballot paper. And those that eulogize him then will criticize him.
Mr. Farotimi, I want you made a very, very controversial statement when you said that you don't want to be accused of complicity in terms of the judiciary. Can you just do an assessment of the judiciary?
Look,
because remember the mantra, the last hope of the masses, as it in any way.
That last hope of the masses was the first frontier that was lost in the war that took away the freedom of the Nigerian people. When I said I do not want to be deemed complicit in the mess that the judiciary has become, I'm a lawyer. For me, law is something of a calling. I have always wanted to be one. But I became a lawyer, and I quickly found that our courts are not any different from our police stations. I found very quickly that what ails the Nigerian custom ails the Nigerian judiciary. I found very quickly that the Nigerian judiciary is peopled by Nigerians. They're not from Ghana. And I say without any equivocation that the Nigerian judicial system is as corrupt as any other part of our nation. That's a fact. We can go around dancing around the issues, but I have seen judgments from the lowest court to the highest in Nigeria today that you can only blame either on incompetence on the part of the jurists or corruption. You can take your pick. Now, I am not unaware of the reflexively defensive posture that most judicial officers and lawyers would take. Those are false umbrages. We can stop lying to ourselves. Some of these corrupt judgments are even more or less institutionalized. When it has been was arrested ostensibly for treason, I'm telling you three things. I don't see you So who you are does not matter. I will treat all of you exactly the same. He's holding a scale. He's saying, I am just. I will measure you equally, the same way. If you have found one thing, my sword is waiting to punish the person who is found wanting. So there is a presumption of equality before the law. There is a presumption of equal access to that justice. And immediately you're saying that the law rules over all. So each person at every point in time knows what their rights and obligations are. And the law is there as an impartial arbiter. The Nigerian state functions. Tell you we have a dysfunctional system.
So why can't we work as a function?
So many of the people like, there's so many good juries, Oputa and the rest of them. If you begin to compare them to the current set, you are being unfair to the current set because you're suggesting that you are getting something different from what the system intended to produce.
Wow. So basically, it's a systemic issue.
It is a systemic issue.
I am tempted to say that we could continue, but we just have 2 or 3 minutes to round up. Let me get your final thoughts on this for 1.5 minutes on the way forward. I know NBA has promised us a paradigm shift. I know the president has also mentioned that very, very cynical smile. The president has also promised to deepen the democratic culture. What's the way forward? You're on international TV.
Right.
Okay, let me get your thoughts.
Seriously, these are, sometimes when somebody describes...
You have 1.5 minutes.
As we speak now, nobody's even looking at. Do you know the chairman of the electoral body in America? Nobody bothers about him, even in Ghana here. So, and here we are, we're talking about deepening democracy, and INEC is the way it is, So, because of time, that's why I said I don't want to go, And then NBA talking about the judiciary, we've said it. When in a state of lawlessness, it is illegal to be law-abiding. What you have, including in the judiciary, is lawlessness. And so how do you now deepen or create, an arm of government, from a lawless, society, lawless situation? You now say, okay, yes, this arm of government would be the one that will uphold the law. When even the way some of the judges are appointed is lawlessness. The last set of judges that were appointed at the FCT High Court.
Inheritance.
Exactly. So if you run through the list, it was a list of, please, the bearer is from me. Interview and employ.
Wow.
And so when you have that kind of foundation, Dele said it, 40 foundation, and then you now say you want to clean up from the top, it will collapse like a pack of cards. And so there is no way, no matter how long we sit down here to say moving forward, the state is by saying, like African China said, poor man when steal Maggie, you go see him face for crime fighter. But rich man when steal money, you know, go see him face for crime fighter.
So we have to give you all. You're okay with what you have said?
No, we are just. So let's give him his one.
He has delivered a long bombshell. So the way forward. There must be a way forward.
Yeah, there must be. If I felt there wasn't a way forward, I would have packed my bags and baggages. I have friends in the Gambia. They will be happy to have me. And I'm black enough to pass for one. Obey Madingo, so I'm sure they would have me gladly. But I continue to hope, and I hope and believe in the essential goodness of the Nigerian spirit. I know that over 99% of us want a better country. But that better country can only happen when the judiciary itself is independent. But the independence of the judiciary that is not anchored to a systemic change and a national transformational movement, because the putrefaction has seeped through each and every one of us. We've become like people who live next to a public toilet. We don't smell anymore, and we are eating our meals unconcerned.
Wow. Such an analogy.
Yeah. We need to critically examine ourselves and know that we need to turn around.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dele Farotimi, a lawyer and public affairs
Retired.
analyst.
Ex-lawyer.
I'm not one of them again.
Okay, retired lawyer. And we have liberals in Oshoba, who still goes to court and is still a proud lawyer, right?
And Dele was my mate in law school.
Wow.
So
And I haven't seen him since the bushes of Buhari until today, except on TV.
You owe us something for bringing both of you together. We're happy to
Don't worry, so much. I'll give you new face masks.
We can end it.
We quite appreciate your time. We quickly have to move to our next segment, and that has to do with the economy. Let's see whether there will be some clear way forward on our economy. That'll be up for next. But before then, let's look at this report put together by Annetta Felix.
Before the discovery of oil, there was the golden age of agriculture. Cotton, rice, groundnut, cocoa, timber, and oil palm were in abundance through harvesting. Each region in the country grew a crop or practiced a craft that served as a foreign exchange earner. The regional federalism in practice at the time allowed each region to control their politics and economy, making each economically independent and inward-looking for survival. By the time oil was discovered in 1958, Nigeria's political and economic structure had begun to change.
Every region was able to take care of itself, have strong institutions, have good political structures. Everybody was independent of the government at the center was not the all-powerful like what we have now. So if you look at that, and that's why we keep saying that there's no state, now when we look at states, or there's no region in Nigeria that cannot fend for itself if we decide to think inwardly. But the challenge was that immediately we saw oil, every other thing became secondary. We marched towards oil.
The oil boom brought economic prosperity to Nigeria from the 1950s and positioned her further as the giant of Africa. But the newfound wealth turned the country to a mono economy and caused an abandonment of other revenue streams like her agricultural produce.
The oil was a plus, it's not a minus, and that was supposed to actually make the economy to grow even faster because there was an addition if we were able to sustain the agricultural production that we had. But I think that there was a decline in that area, and that means that a lot of emphasis was placed on the oil that was discovered. It was an easier way of making money for the government and the states. So the agricultural economy was abandoned, basically.
Diversified economy Nigeria became mono-economy Nigeria, and fiscal federalism became pseudo-federalism. Economic analyst Mukhtar Mohammed says the bridge between both points was the quality of Nigerian leadership.
Then we talk about Bafemi Awolowo, we talk about Tafawa Balewa, Ahmadu Bello, Michael Okpara. They could talk about any economic issues compared to now that they don't seem to have an idea, rather the technocrats sell the idea to them. They don't have any depth in terms of economic value.
As Nigeria clocks 60, Chris Ndulue looks back to measure the country's economic status in comparison with other oil-producing countries.
You cannot score Nigeria very high in so many areas, in almost all indices. If you look at where Nigeria was in 1960 when it got independence, you look at where Nigeria was in the 70s, 10 years, 15 years after independence. At that time, yes, we were the giant of Africa, and everybody was looking up to Nigeria to be the leading light, to provide that economic emancipation of the African continent. But that hasn't happened.
Looking ahead, Ndulue and Mukhtar make these key suggestions for the economic growth of Nigeria.
Let's go back to education. Let's see how we can come up with that, not the 6334. We used to have the technical school, so not everybody will say, I don't have knowledge to go to school, but I can still make chairs. I can still be a carpenter. I can still be a trader. Those are the type of things that we need to begin to see. Look at our people, not just pushing the foreign education to them. Foreign education is good, but what is education? I think education is for people to read and write. Once they can read and write, can they look at what they can do better?
We need to give the states more autonomy in terms of economic issues. Economic freedom for the states is important because the states can now decide to look at the human resources they have and decide on how to channel their energies into productive things.
Nigeria is the largest producer of oil in Africa, endowed with other natural resources and over 200 million strong population. Yet, 40% of her people, or 82 million Nigerians, live below the poverty line. Analysts say the way out is economic diversification and a return to fiscal federalism, like the days before the discovery of oil. Annetta, Felix, Plus TV Africa.
For upcoming artists to blow in Nigeria.
Welcome to Plus Trending. I am Bookie November, your host, saying thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Welcome back. It's tea time on Plus TV Africa.
Practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect yet, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
He's a king. He's entitled to marry 100 if he wants to.
This is Plus Politics on Plus TV Africa.
There were a lot of men, but they chose me.
Parties in Nigeria, they're simply platforms of convenience for people to go and aspire for power.
If you were not awarded a contract, then why are you coming here that you are aware?
Let me explain. No, it's okay.
Some people have also accused you of talking too much.
Even if I say things, people like Obasanjo should tell us, don't say that. Not that Obasanjo will be saying, and with results that will be carrying cake to go and say, Obasanjo, stop that.
If you have your family issues, you don't discuss them in the marketplace.
Those who will take over governance after the exit of the military will be mindful of the economic deprivation of our people.
Will the cost of governance ever be reduced?
Census good, but timing has to be right.
The people who are getting the palliative right now may be the wrong people because we do not have data.
Plus Politics, 7 p.m. Mondays to Fridays on Plus TV Africa.
Just opening your mouth to say what you think doesn't make it true. There is no sovereign immunity when you take a commercial loan. Those who criticize the government for borrowing should come out and provide the alternative source of funding. This is the argument. Politics is a very, very interesting and dynamic undertaking, and it is a game of persuasion. People can say what they like, but what are the facts? For that unborn generation, we have a choice. Let us as a nation decide that we want them to wait until 2050 to come and do it at 2050 price.
Recently, you were included in the Special Committee on Power. Is this another subtle way of bringing you back to continue where you stopped?
Well, I think that question should be directed to the authorities that brought me back. They would know why better.
One-on-One with Babatunde Fashola, premiering October 1st at 12:30 p.m. and repeat at 8:30 p.m.
Thank you for still staying with us on this day where we are celebrating Nigeria at 60, and we still continue the special broadcast for Independence Day. This segment will be taking a look at our economy and how Nigeria has fared in it, and to make sense of it and help us dissect it and look critically on the issues affecting our economy, we have Opeyemi Agbaje, who is a policy analyst. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning and happy independence.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us. I'm sure you saw the reports that we played. Very quickly, my first question would be for you. 60 years after, how do you rate our economy?
I think there's no doubt if you look at the quality of life of the average Nigerian, if you look at the indices around human development, infrastructure, if you look at the current state of the Nigerian economy as we speak, if you look at the fact that for the last 5 years, so it's not easy to dismiss our current economic conditions as purely the consequence of COVID-19 or whatever. Because for the past 5 years, the Nigerian economy has either been in recession or has grown at less than 2%. So the bottom line is that we have underperformed economically to the detriment of our people and to the detriment of the quality of the life and the quality of infrastructure that the country should boast of. I would say that we could have done very much better.
Okay, there is a mantra which was also predominant in that report, and that mantra is diversification. And a quick recap of that is that we had the cocoa, we had the timber, we had the granite pyramid, and virtually all the regions were competing comfortably well, and we were donating to the federal. Is it a problem of structure or a problem of distraction that we now have what we have now?
Let me put some context to it. So first of all, when we talk about diversification, there are three things that we could be talking about. First, the structure of domestic production in terms of GDP. Our GDP is reasonably diversified. We have, if you look at the last results we got, agriculture is somewhere around 20% of GDP, trade, you have telecoms, you have manufacturing. So the structure of GDP looks like a diversified economy. But when you get to exports, what do we export to the world? Then you see that we export only one thing, by and large. Yes, there are other things, but one thing accounts for the overwhelming majority, and that is oil. And therefore, the structure of our foreign income, our foreign currency earnings, our dollar earnings, our reserves, is also then mono product, oil. Same thing with government revenue. That's the third area in which we have this problem of this issue of diversification. Government revenue then becomes wholly concentrated around earnings from oil. And those two issues are why the Nigerian economy suffers from the perils of oil price shocks every time there is a problem with oil. So we have our governments rely on oil for 75%, 65 to 75, lower now because of the current conditions. But at a point, they relied on oil for 95% of our I mean, for government revenue, 75% of government revenue and 95% of export income. That is the problem of the diversification. It's a problem that we created, of course, we know the history. Once we had oil in economic condition, in quantities, the Nigerian planners, Nigerian governments began to think differently. We de facto discontinued that natural transition that you referred to in your report, in which each of the regions were competitive, each of them focused on areas of comparative advantage. The West focused on cocoa, focused on crops that it grew naturally and exported those things, began to develop an industrial value chain. So we began to build industries around cocoa processing, Cadbury, cocoa processing industries, all of that. The North saw its comparative advantage around cotton, began to invest in textiles. We began to develop a natural sequence of economic development on the basis of comparative advantage. And we were building a value chain from agriculture to industry. The moment we began to get this psyche around, we are now a wealthy country. We don't really have a problem of money. It is how do we deploy it, which was the statement that was true, because in the end, we deployed did badly, but the point is then the logic changed. Then we began to build industries that depended on imported raw materials rather than raw materials that were natural to the environment. And that changed the trajectory of Nigeria's industry. And of course, we then began to build, we developed the big elephant, the white elephant mentality, and began to do big things. Festa, National Stadium, things that were not necessarily driven by economic logic. That is the problem we have. Now we've internalized that consumption pattern. We've internalized it, and now we find it difficult. We've built industries on the structure of imported raw materials, by and large. We've built system of consumption. We've built even governments around that earnings level. We built a big presidential system of government. And like your report correctly mentioned, ongoing with that was a political move away from federalism to a system of the sharing of oil rents based on a pseudo-unitary system of government. So we've created both a political and economic structure that does not encourage productivity, that does not look at your natural comparative economic advantages, and that suboptimizes the outcomes for everybody. So we haven't done well. We've created a bad structure, economic structure, and we would have to fundamentally rethink and restructure that, both politically and economically.
All right, which brings me to my next question for you, Mr. Agbaje. You know, earlier on you mentioned that the economy has not grown less than 2%, and it's, you know, we can't also blame everything on COVID-19. Essentially, before COVID-19, we've already had issues with our economy. Now, what are those key areas we should begin to look into inwards? You know, when you talk about materials that we have within our own economy that we should now begin to harness. As we do know, oil is no more the thing. So where next? What do we do to still make this economy thriving and growing for, you know, every Nigerian?
So first of all, like we've said, there's the agricultural value chain, building industrialization on the basis of what you produce in agriculture. That we have to restart. But then the world has also changed. The global economy has also changed. So things are not the way they were in 1960, unfortunately. So now we have to look at technology-driven development as well. We have to begin to focus on how to build agriculture itself based on mechanization, based on technology. Our agriculture today is still, by and large, dependent on one variable, rainfall. If you read every analysis of agricultural output every year, it's based on rainfall. So it's not based significantly on policy intervention or on the deployment of technology. So we have to rebuild agriculture itself, but we also have to build a more modern economy around technology, around modernizing every aspect of our economy. So for instance, take our real estate sector, which is around 8% of Nigeria's GDP. That sector is performing all of that in the absence of a mortgage sector. You have to create a mortgage sector. If you look at our industrial manufacturing sector, about 10% of the Nigerian economy, much of it depended on imported raw materials, as we've said. We have to grow that. We can't abandon the ones that are dependent on imported raw materials, but we have to increase the proportion of industrialization that is based on local raw materials and support them and create the infrastructure around that. A lot of policy has to change. For instance, if you look at infrastructure, it is clear, it is evident that government resources cannot provide the infrastructure that will, cannot meet over a 50-year period. The resources from government cannot transform Nigeria.
Okay.
So the question is, how do you get private resources, including foreign direct investment into Nigeria's infrastructure? The answer to that question is that you have to create a policy environment that makes infrastructure investment attractive. You have to create a legal environment that protects the investor. You have to create a framework that investors trust around public-private partnership. So there is a whole series of reforms that we will need to implement
Mr. Gbaje,
to get our economy
Mr.
modernized
Gbaje,
and create prosperity for our people.
so much to talk about, but we want to see how we could manage our time for the next few more minutes that we have. Part of the things highlighted in that report done by Annette Felix, a mention was something was done about whether this oil was a boom or a doom for us, because as we speak, there are a lot of inventions. We have the knowledge economy, which seems to be what is thriving now, and we are turning a blind eye to that industry. We're talking about, you mentioned the real estate, we're talking about the ICT that COVID has forced on us, and we see a whole lot happening in that industry. But what we hear, our government is still setting a benchmark on oil, talking about the oil we will get and it will still be refined outside the shores of this country. Are we ever thinking way forward?
The oil was a blessing, unfortunately. We didn't have the thinking. And like your report mentioned, the leadership, the quality of leadership. Imagine if the oil boom had happened and provided resources to Awolowo to further transform the West, or for Okpara to further industrialize the East, or for Sir Ahmadu Bello to further build the northern economy. So it was a unfortunate combination of excessive resources in the hands of completely inexperienced people. If the combination had been different, perhaps the outcomes will have been different. But where we are today, I think that Nigerian government is still, as you correctly mentioned, it still has this focus on oil. It's still in denial about the end of the oil era. So all the psychology is around oil. Even when we went to the recession, they said oil put us in recession and oil will bring us out. It was an opportunity to change our mindset, but we refused to take that opportunity. So why are we today? Like, I agree with you, we have to build the economy around human capital, around technology, around industrialization, and the fundamental errors we've made is that we've destroyed the quality of our people in terms of education, in terms of skill, in terms of competence. We have to go back to that. We have to invest in our people. Our people truly are our greatest assets. The human capital that Nigeria has, the abundance of energy of our youth, the creativity of our people. That's our greatest asset, not oil, and not even the infrastructure that we can build, but our people. So we have to build that. If we build that, we will dominate in technology, we will dominate in creative sectors, we will dominate in sports, we will dominate in multiple areas, and then we would have the creativity in the business sector to make the investments in industry and in infrastructure that will improve the quality of life of our people. So the mindset change in the public sector around the end of the oil era, and the need to build an alternative economy around people, around infrastructure, and around industrialization needs to happen. It hasn't happened yet.
All right, and if I may just add to what Mr. Ladende here had asked you, do we still have a chance to compete in the global economy in spite of all the issues that you have highlighted and raised? What chance do we have?
Actually, if you look at the Nigerian people are incredible, and I insist that we are the real assets of the people, in spite of all these constraints. If you look at the results that have come from Nigerians, it's disproportionate. And therefore, it reinforces the fact that certainly Nigeria's all hope is not lost. Certainly Nigeria is not 100% a bad story. There are advantages, there are positives. But those positives often have happened in spite of the environment. It has happened because of the resilience of the Nigerians. And Nigerians always outperform, even when they go outside the country. So I'm very optimistic about the outcomes of the Nigerian nation. I think that we have built so much resilience into ourselves, the hardships, the constraints, that if we slightly improve the environment, if we slightly improve the variables.
Now.
The problem with population is that if you invest in it,